Well, no, it's actually more complicated than that.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Car Talk. I'm still listening to the book The Master and His Emissary, and I only have 9 hours yet to go. Woohoo! I love this book. And right now he's talking about the pre-Socratic philosophers, and in particular Anaximander, and how the philosophy of this period was framed much more through the right hemisphere than the left. If you look at the writings of Anaximander, he talked about the apeiron. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but essentially the unbounded, the unlimited. This was I don't want to call it a thing, but it's the nature of all things. It gives rise to all things. It is where things come from and where things go to die. So there's this endless, unlimited, unbounded cycle of isness. And there's this balance between giving and taking. And that's very much a right hemisphere appraisal of things. So why I bring that up now is that from the perspective of the right hemisphere, things are eternal, they're global, they're universal, they're endless. So if you are in a situation that feels depressive, if you're in some kind of depression, and therefore your right hemisphere is dominant, the words that you use are going to be framed from the right. So you're going to use words like never, always, everywhere, nowhere, because that's how the right frames things. So if you find yourself saying things like, it never works out for me, no one likes me, this will never end, oh my God, it's always going to be like this, then you know you're framing things through your right hemisphere and you're probably in a depression. A lot of people don't like to admit that they're in a depression, and I don't see anything wrong with it, but our culture does. And a lot of people don't know how to quite define it. So depression doesn't have to be something that you experience all day, every day. It can be something that you dip in and out of. How am I framing this right now? Am I framing it through the right or am I framing it through the left? If there are words like always and never, you know you're using the right hemisphere to frame it. There's this eternality. There's an apeiron. There's this thing that's so big and I am so small or even non-existent. My ability to compete with it or to control it is non-existent. So what's my point? Well, depending on where the blood is in your brain, you're either going to see no point or you're going to see a very clear point. And once you begin to recognize the rhythms of your brain and how it shifts perspective, how it creates different frames to see the world through, then suddenly you get some freedom. Rather than things being true, either in this global eternal sense of doom or in this very specific sense of must do, must have. But once you realize that outside of that, there is an embodied experience, there is an unattached observer that uses these frames, the right or the left or a mixture of both, as directionals, as cues, as markers to possibly take a particular action. So our brain and body are trying to influence us. They're trying to put us into a flow, a fluency. Flow in this direction or flow in that direction. Or just back up and say, okay, thank you for the suggestions. And I'm going to look around, I'm going to take a moment, and I don't think either one is appropriate. So I'm going to do this instead. Okay? And right now, I'm going to go upstairs instead of sitting here in a cold car. See you in a bit. There's a door on the second floor and a loading door on the third floor. This makes me think about how people often have their plan in the middle, inside their head, inside the building, the structure that they are. And when they try to step into the world, they're not stepping at ground level. They're not grounded when they try to take steps. They're trying to take steps out of the second floor or out of the third floor, thinking that that's where they are, because the left side of the brain, not really understanding reality, when it's setting the plans, it's creating a starting point that is not consistent with reality. So the steps that they're going to take, or at least the very first step they're going to take, is going to lead to a crashing halt. Or they open the door and they look at reality and like, oh my God, I can't take that step. Not possible. So this is a great metaphor for how we try to step into the world. Often the starting point, or where we believe ourselves to be prior to opening the door, is not where we actually are, and that we need to find a way to ground ourselves before taking the step. We need to get out of the story of who we are and what the world is before we take that step, before we open the door. Which reminds me of acting class, where one of the things we train in is the moment before. So whenever you open a door in a scene, in a film or a play or whatever, you have to know what the moment before is. What just happened before I opened this door? And I think that's important in life too, as an actor, as someone who acts in your life. What's happening the moment before you open that door? Are you grounded, or do you have lofty ideas?